This is Sean. Welcome back to the American Soccer Coach. This is going to be a really interesting video. I want to talk about why you're very rarely going to see creative homegrown players in MLS. Now, this is kind of an interesting topic because MLS is a salary cap league, which means that clubs can only spend a certain amount of money on players. Now, in saying that, you have 3 designated player spots within the league where you can go outside of the salary cap and spend more money for a specific player. So most teams have utilized this by spending that money in the midfield and forward position. Ultimately, most teams end up investing in a creative player such as an attacking midfielder. So if you have a designated player coming into a team, they need to be starting. A designated player should be one of the best 2 or 3 players on the team. So if most teams in MLS are going to be investing money on a designated player, you can have a fantastic 16 or 17-year-old kid from your academy. But are you going to risk playing that player over a player who should be a star, that it should be like maybe 26 or 27 years old, coming in on big money? And my argument to that is, or what I would say is, for the most part, the answer to that would be no. So I think that with the way that salary cap works in MLS, a lot of the players that end up signing homegrown contracts, they're signing relatively cheap deals they're nowhere near designated player deals. So what kind of players are going to become designated, or what kind of players are going to become homegrown players? Players that are not going to be that expensive for the most part. Players that can play a role in the team. Maybe a backup center mid, backup holding mid, maybe an outside back, a goalie, maybe a center back. So, but it's going to be very rare to, especially if we're talking about like the typical number 10 attacking midfielder, it's going to be very rare to see a kid 16 to 18, maybe even 19 years old, just walk into an MLS team from the academy and immediately get a lot of reps, a lot of starts, because their competition in that position is usually the star player, one of the designated players of the team. So like I was saying, if you're a left back, your competition at left back is not going to be generally as high as your competition would be as a number 10 or even as a center forward, as a number 9. Because that is where the money in MLS teams, for the most part, is always going to be spent. The designated player money is always spent in the final third. The attacking midfielder, the number 9, maybe sometimes on a winger as well. So I think that is one of the main reasons that it's going to be very difficult to get creative players signing with MLS teams at a very young age. And so I think a lot of people have this kind of blanket statement that Europe is always better for younger players, or MLS is always the better route for younger players. It really depends on the situation. I think for an attacking midfielder, even with training compensation and everything that's going on in the United States, I think a lot of creative players that are 16, 18 years old, I mean, obviously they need to have a work permit and they need to make sure that they can be in Europe. But if they can, I think a lot of creative players, young talented American creative players, are going to not stay in MLS. They're not going to stay in academies as long as clubs in Europe are willing to spend the fees to get these players through training compensation. I think that clubs in Germany or clubs in Portugal or clubs maybe even in England are going to get these players, and if they're very good players, for example, a player like Alex Mendez or even a player like Richie Ledesma that's at PSV. I think that players that kind of fit that mold, similar style players, similar position players, are going to continue to go to Europe because, again, I think that European teams, they want to, if the players are young and talented and they have a lot of potential, they want to get them games because they know that eventually either they can make an impact on the first team, or if they're doing really well, they could eventually sell them off for significantly higher money. And I think that MLS teams are much more reluctant on that because in certain positions they need players to produce. And the reality is that is a lot of weight on a 17-year-old shoulder. So to give that attacking mid position to a designated player is a much more safer option. It's a safer bet. And so because of that, I think that's going to continue to happen. It makes sense. I think it makes complete sense. It's just the unfortunate reality of how a salary cap league works. And again, this is very position specific. So I would not say the same thing for, like, for example, a left or right back. This is specifically for attacking players, creative players, where usually the money is going to be spent in MLS. Let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear it. Take care.